Hi guys, welcome back. This is the 9th video of the restaurant management Golang backend project series. So in this video the target is to complete the get foods function and the update food function. That will also require us to complete these two functions, round and toFixed. We'll do that, but before we do any of that, there is one little thing that we need to take care of, which is in your update menu function that we built in the last video. We have this in time span function that's required, and last time we didn't end up building this function, so it's a very simple small function. So let's first work on that. So func in time span will have a start, end, and check, which will be of time.time. It just returns a boolean. So we'll say return start dot after time dot now and end dot after start. So now you'll notice that the squiggly line for this function, when we're calling this function in time span, it has gone away because we have defined the function here, right? So all this function is doing, it's basically taking your start date, end date, and the date right now, the time right now, and it's checking if the end date is after, in fact, the start date, right? So for example, if start date is 5th, then end date has to be like 6th or any other date date after that. So this is like a small check, completely optional. Start date and end date are two values that we're taking when you're creating a menu, and it's completely optional. You can have this check, but I usually like to keep these kind of checks with dates, just to make sure that end date is in fact in the future or after the start date. All right, so since we have this function now, our menu controller file is complete now. Okay, so now we'll have to work on food controller. So food controller, you already know that we'll be working on the get foods function. So let's start quickly. Here in the get foods function, all we're trying to do, basically the whole aim is to get all the food items right in one go. So it's not super complex, but there are a few things that we need to do, right? So just try and follow along with me. So we already returned this function, and here the standard thing to do that we already do is context and cancel, right? So since we're building the get all foods function for the first time, like in the sense we don't have get all invoices, menus, or control orders on all those things, so we'll try and write it manually, and after that we'll try to copy and paste it, and then edit things in it. So here you have context.background, comma 100 multiplied by time second. So there will be some background noise because there's some work going on in my house, so I sincerely apologize for that. But I'll try and add some music in the video so that you don't hear a lot of background noise. I'm shifting to another city soon, so that's why there's you will hear some noise because we're packing stuff up. So here we have record per page. Now the thing with functions like get foods, like which return basically all the food items in the database, the problem with these kind of functions is that if there are a lot of records, like let's say thousands, hundreds of records, and all of those records are sent to the front end in just one go, the front end will get overwhelmed. It won't be able to process so much data. So what I always try to do is I always try to keep like a pagination kind of a thing built in, which reduces the chances of having too much data being sent to the front end. All right, so I also recommend you to, like, this is again optional, but I recommend you that you do this always, because sooner or later you'll have to work with other front-end developers who will be working through off of your APIs, and they'll point out these issues to you. So it's a good way to prepare for the future, right? So if error is not equal to nil, or record per page is less than 1, then record per page is equal to 10. So by default, the records that we are sending per page is 10. So if you've used Node.js, it's a very we do a very similar thing where let's say if there's no value for record per page, or the record per page value somebody has sent it as 0 or in minus or anything like that, by default we return at least 10 records per page, because 10 or 20 records doesn't matter, but if it's in hundreds and thousands, then the front end can start getting really overwhelmed. All right, so here you also have a query for which page do you want. So like you will have records per page, and then of which page do you want those records, right? That's how pagination works. You have page 1, page 2, page 3, all pages will have 10 records each, right? So again, I apologize for the background noise if you can hear a lot of background noise. It'll just last for a few days in the future, like 5-6 days in the future. I'll have some background noise, but after that, it'll stop, because the next few days there's some work going on in my house, right? And if there's no page, right, so there are two things, right? Records per page and page. So if page is also less than 1, or somebody's given a negative value by mistake, or 0 by mistake, or no value, then you just send page is equal to 1, as in the first page, the values of the first page is what you need. And then you have something called a skip and limit. If you've used Node.js, you know skip and limit. So all you're doing here is you're saying start index and page -1 multiplied by record per page. If you don't know what this is, just read about skip and limit. Is the same thing, right? And Node.js is exactly the same thing that we're doing out here. And this is your start index. Now we'll start creating our aggregation query, right? So there'll be a match stage. If you've not used MongoDB aggregation, don't worry, just try to follow along in this video, and in the future I'll be creating a complete series on how MongoDB aggregations work. So for now, just build along with me. So aggregation has these different stages, right? So there's a match stage, there's a group stage, and there's a project stage. I'll try to explain to you right now what these stages do. But aggregation is a huge topic, and it can get really complicated. But right now we're using a very small part of aggregation, but it's a huge topic, right? So I'll try to explain to you right now, but if you have the time, do go check it out on the internet, or if you can wait a few days, I'll make a complete series on aggregation in MongoDB, right? So match stage basically matches the records using a criteria. So the criteria you'll pass from here, it'll go to the database, it'll match those records matching that criteria. Group is going to group using that criteria. So let's say you say that I want all the records to be grouped by name. So all the it'll take out all the individual or the unique names, and it'll group the records using that criteria. And then you'll have project stage. Project stage basically allows you to define what all values should go to the front end. So in the sense, let's say you want the percentage or the addition or any particular values to go to the front end, you can define that using the project stage, right? Or if you don't want something to go to the front end. Like I said, I've tried to explain to you in a very small, in a very quick manner, but you can obviously, understand it, and you can, read about it in more detail. So for the match stage, what we'll write is so we'll give the actual query that's required. So it will be $match. So the benefit of using BSON is that it helps you to actually start writing real queries that's required by MongoDB, right? So you'll say bson.d. So what this means is that you're using the $match stage in MongoDB, but you're passing an empty criteria, in the sense match using nothing, so it's empty, right? But in the future you could match using different criteria. You could pass different criteria here. And here for the group stage, we'll again use the $group command $group comma bson.d, and here you'll say id comma bson.d, id comma null. All right, and after this bracket closes, right, then you'll find the count. Total count comma bson.d $sum comma 1. Now it's possible that you don't understand anything that's going on here, right, because you have no idea how MongoDB aggregation works. So let me do one thing. Let me try and explain to you what's happening out here. So let's say you say on Google, you go and say MongoDB aggregation. So you go to this page, and rather than that, I'll just type a command like, let's say $bucket or something like that. It'll take me to the exact page. So it's taking me to the exact page that's required, right, inside reference, inside aggregation pipelines. Now there are two things, right? One is aggregation pipeline stages, the other is aggregation pipeline operators. So that's what you need to know, right? You need to know that there are stages in aggregation for pipeline and there are operators. So right now the stage that we're using is called group, right? So let's try and find group. So this is $group. So $group is the exact command that we are passing, and with the help of bson we're able to pass that command, right? $group. And it has something called as an ID field. So if you look at our command, our code, we're passing the ID field that, you know, what do you want to group this by. So right now we're saying that group it by null. Don't like group it by anything specific, but group it by null. All right, but find the total count of all the items present in the database. All right, for all the foods. So this means that we are passing something called as $sum. Now, $sum is not a pipeline stage. It is something called as a pipeline operator. Here you'll be able to see $sum, right? So that's a pipeline aggregation operator. Now $sum being an operator, you can use it with all these different pipeline stages. So it says $sum is available in these stages like add fields, bucket auto, group, and group is the one that we're using right now, right? So it's available in group, match, and project, all these three that we'll be using right now, but most important right now is group because we're using $sum with group. So just make sure that you understand this. There are two things, right? Pipeline stages and pipeline operators. Operators can be used with specific operators can only be used with specific stages. It can't be used with all of the stages, all right? And there is a reason for that. I'll explain to you when I do the complete MongoDB course. So I hope this is kind of making sense to you, right? Even if it doesn't make sense to you, just follow along, and maybe, you know, in the future, while coding this entire project, maybe things will start making sense to you. Or if it still doesn't make sense, then just hit me up in the comments. I'm always there. I'll try and explain to you again. So here we'll say $project. $project is the exact command for MongoDB, and here you'll say id comma 0, total count comma 1, comma food items comma bson.d $slice comma interface $data comma start index and record per page. All right, so what's happening here is you're using the $project. All right, and you're passing all these different criteria. The first is that when you say id 0, that means you don't want whenever there's a 0, it means that this field won't go to the front end. Whenever there's a 1, that means that field will go to the front end. So you'll say 0 for ID, that you don't want ID to go, and total count means you want that it to go to the front end, right? And then you have food items. For food items, you're using slice, right? And this, let me explain to you again. So I've written this line, but I'm pretty sure this doesn't make much sense to you. All right. So let me explain to you. Let me try and explain to you. But first, we have to get something called as dollar data, right? So where does that come from? That will happen at this stage, at group stage. So the problem with the dollar group stage is that it will find the total count for you, but all the actual records will actually disappear, right? So this is something that if you haven't tried it out, you should try it out in MongoDB. Try out a dollar group stage operation. What happens at that stage is when the after the stage, the actual data is lost, and all you are left with is this total count. So that the data is not lost, we do something for that, and that's this. Basically, create this create this bracket with me and say data, comma, based on .d, and here you'll say $push. So $push is a pipeline operator, and it's going to take $$ root. So whatever data that was passed to the group stage, all of that data is going to be pushed into an array called data. So the data field, which will be now added to this data now after the group stage, will basically contain all the records. And using the project stage, you're controlling what all data fields need to go. So one is ID, needs to be 0. We don't want the ID. We want the total count, and we want some food items, right? And what is food items? Food items is basically your data, but with and you're passing start index and record per page. I'll tell you why. And you're passing that in a operator called $slice. So to understand what $slice is, you have to open up your browser and see $slice MongoDB. Okay. So this is a projection operation. Projection operators, and so you have $lm match, and then you have $slice. So $slice is the type of projection operation. Sorry, I had a lot of cold drinks yesterday, so that's why I'm coughing a little today. So $slice, what it does is it controls the number of, specifies number of elements to return in the array field. All right. How do you control that? You control using start index and records per page, as in where do you start from and how many records per page do you want, which is skip and limit for us, right? So that's what $slice is doing. So it's quite straightforward. If you understand what it is, it's quite straightforward. There's no magic that's happening here. And now, after this bracket, right, this particular bracket, after the project stage, you want to run your aggregation function and pass all these stages in that. All right. So to run the aggregation function, you'll have to select a collection. So in our case, that's a food collection, and that collection you want to run the aggregate function. We'll pass our context, and in the pipeline, which is aggregation pipeline. Now Mongo is the package that helps us to access the pipeline, right? So I know with Golang, it's not as as elegant as it is with Mongoose. So if you've used Node.js, if you use Node.js and MongoDB, you've probably used a package called Mongoose to take your MongoDB queries and then to basically build your MongoDB queries. So Mongoose is much more elegant in the sense that you have to do a lot less. You don't have to actually write, like the syntax is much easier, basically, is all I'm trying to say. But with Golang, it's not like that. You have to write quite a bit of syntax, and it's not, and it's mostly you're writing like MongoDB stuff in the sense you're not writing, some syntax that is then converted into MongoDB. That's a language that MongoDB understands, right? So it's not as elegant as Mongoose, but it's good. I mean, I am not complaining. All right. But once you get used to it, it's obviously it's pretty nice. All right. But if you're a developer and if you can create something like Mongoose for Golang, that'll be amazing. Anyhow, so, or if you want to collaborate with me and let's build it together, we can do that as well. All right. So let's together build. A library like Mongoose for Golang. or maybe it even exists. I've not researched too much. I'm just using the libraries that I know about, so maybe somebody has already made it, so I'll have to research a little bit on that. Anyhow, so I've created the aggregate function. I passed the 3 stages: match stage, group stage, and project stage, one after the other. Okay, now the order of these stages is also very important. Project stage is usually at the end because you're defining the values that will go to the front end, so you don't want to ideally have it in the beginning. So the mistakes that a lot of newbies make is that they mess up the order of the aggregation stages, and then they get confused a lot. So just make sure that you've used match before group and then project. All right, there's a reason for this. The reason, like I said, is first you match, and then you are left with a few records, and then you group them, you find the total count, and then you project what all data values or fields you want to go to the front end. All right, so after that you have defer, cancel, and you'll just check for errors. So if error equal to nil, so in case you're getting confused, which error we're checking is this error. After aggregation, we're checking that error. If that's equal to nil, c.json http dot. So this is one thing that I really like about MongoDB, is that you can keep checking errors just after you complete an operation, right? So there's complete clarity on which line the error is there. This is something that's not I've not seen happen with JavaScript. So error occurred while listing food items. Right, so here we'll create a variable called foods, all foods, which is of type bson.m. Okay, and we'll say result dot all, pass context, comma, ampersand all foods, and here we'll say if error is equal to, and we'll check for error. If error not equal to nil, log dot fatal error. So like I said, I know I said that I'm going to complete these things very quickly, but I'm still trying to explain every single line, even though I'm assuming you've done all the other tutorials on my channel before you're tackling this project. Even though I'm saying that, I'm still trying to explain every single line, so that in case you have come here without learning a lot of Golang, you'll still probably understand a lot of what's happening in this video. Status okay, comma, all foods 0. Okay, so you're basically essentially returning this variable called all foods, which is an array or a slice, whatever you want to call it, and you're also returning status okay if everything has gone well. All right, so that's your entire function. You're done with get foods, you're done with get food, create food. Now all that's left is update food, which is slightly long, but it's very similar to update menu. So I'm going to take a couple of things from there, but I'm also going to type a lot of things. So I'll go fast with update food, right? I won't be explaining a lot. So the first thing is that I'm going to copy and paste this line here, right? So copy and paste that. Now for food, unlike menu, for food you need the menu to be there, right? And then you need to create the food item. So we'll say menu. So will be models dot menu, and then you have food, which will be models dot food. So far so good. And then you'll also get access to your food ID. All right, param food ID. So you'll say food ID c dot param food ID. All right, and here again, just like your menu, you'll check for error. So you'll copy and paste this whole part here, and here instead of menu you'll just write food. All right, so far so good. And then what you need is this, right, your update object. So similarly, like we did for menu, we want to create an update object, which will be the new object that we'll send to the backend to replace the current object, right? So this is the updated object. Now the updated object, there'll be a couple of things that we'll have to do here. So we'll say if food dot name not equal to nil, right? And then food dot price and food dot image. So just like we put the checks here for name and category, we'll have to put some checks here for food dot price not equal to nil and food dot image. So we'll say if food dot food image not equal to nil, put some check here, and the most important part, which is food dot menu id, because a food item belongs to a menu and that needs to be present first before you can add the food item. And after you put these checks, you will have food dot updated at. Just like here you had menu dot updated at, you'll have food dot updated at. So I'll just copy and paste this whole part actually. Which is going to be the same. After that, you have something very similar like this, right? So you'll just copy this statement as well, the updated for the updated object, and you'll copy and paste it here. Here instead of menu, you'll just say food. Okay, and then it's quite straightforward. It's absurd equal to true. We'll add a filter, which will basically be food ID, right? So you have filter, and you will create options like this. So option going to be options dot update options and absurd ampersand absurd comma, just like you did here, the same thing. Instead of copying, I just typed it on my own, but you can feel free to copy if you want to. And then we have the same thing, we just want to create our update one function. So we'll say food collection dot update one. If you're new to Golang, I suggest you don't copy and paste anything, you type everything out on your own, because you'll really get used to the syntax. $set comma update object, put a comma here, right? Ampersand opt, put a comma here again, and this you already know that you'll be capturing in a variable called result, and you'll also be capturing error, just like you did here. And again, I think we've made the same mistake here. So update one is not a curly brace, it's actually a round bracket. So that's why you'll have to end it with a round bracket out here. Now, just like we do every time with Golang, we check for the error just after we've called this database function, which is a best practice. So here you'll say fmt.sprintf food item update failed. By mistake, I've put two brackets here, only one is required. Awesome. c.json http.status internal error comma chin.h error and then msg return. Of return, you'll say c.json http.status okay comma result. Okay, so our update food function is almost complete, but we just have to fill in these four different checks, so which will be quite fast for us. What we'll do here is we'll say updated object is equal to append update object, comma bson.e, name, comma food.name. Okay, and food.price is equal to update object is equal to append update object, comma bson.e, price, comma food.price. And then you have your image, so you'll just say update object is equal to append update object, comma bson.e, food underscore image, okay. And food menu, you will have menu collection dot find one. So I'm sure you know what's happening here. You're first checking if menu ID is not nil. That means we have a menu ID for our food item, and if all is good, sorry, I think I should have written food image. So we're checking, we're finding one, right? We're finding a menu, finding the menu with the ID. So we'll say bson.m menu ID, food.menu ID, and here you'll say dot decode ampersand menu. Okay, defer cancel. We'll check for error. If error not equal to nil, we'll say message is equal to fmt.sprint sprintf message menu is not found. Okay, again by mistake I've put double brackets, shouldn't have. So menu is not found. If menu is not there, then obviously you'll say status internal server errors, because the menu in which you want to add the food item, that menu itself doesn't exist, right? So you'll say msg and you'll say return. All right, that's returned. And here you'll say update object is equal to append update object, comma bson.e menu food dot price. And then you have your updated ad and update object and all of those different things. So now your update food is kind of complete. So to close this file of food controller, there's one small detail that you need to fix. When you create food function, there's this toFixed function that we don't have yet, which we'll create right now, and then we're good to go away from this file. So we'll say output is equal to math.power10, comma float 64 precision, and we'll return round number So this round function also needs to be created by us. So here we'll say return int num plus math dot copy sign 0.5 comma num. Right, so this is just a fancy number to a fancy function to just get a fixed number. That's it. All right, to create a fixed. And now our food controller file is complete. So now we'll start working on, in the next video that is, we'll start working on our invoice controllers, order, table, like next 2 videos we'll try and finish all those 3 controllers. And then in the video after that, we'll try to cover our user controller and helpers and middleware, all of that. So we're not very far from completing our project actually, because most of the logic that is required is here with us. We just need to copy and paste a lot of stuff and change a lot of values, and then we'll get where we want to be. So thanks a lot for watching, and this video has been a little long, I know, but I had time, so I made the long video. So thanks a lot for watching, and do subscribe to this channel so that you come to know when the next video of this series comes out, and see you in the next episode. Bye.